Cool.
So you run a Shuai jiao school in New York City, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We run a class. So we being Chifa Gabrielle Benjuda, Mario Polito, Harry Fontanas, and myself, we run the Tuesdays and Thursdays class for New York Shuai Jiao, and Frank Gomez runs a Monday class over Atlantic Avenue.
That's the name of the school, New York Shuai Jiao?
Yes, you got it.
Okay. Tell me more about this martial art. How old is it?
All right, so we'll argue that it's about 5,000 years old.
Wow.
People have to prove it, of course, like anything else. But there's artifacts, there's some remnants of stories, and basically there's enough proof that there was a wrestling style called jiao back about 5,000 years in the First Dynasty. It was called horn butting, basically, at that point. And there's a lot of speculation about what that really means. They argue that they're supposed to be butting each other with horns and wrestling with those horns. I'm not 100% if that's right, but I don't know. I'm not a historian.
Who was the founder of this art? And why is it called Shuai Jiao now? You said it was called, what is it?
Jiao Di.
Jiao Di.
So over the past 5,000 years, it's gone through a lot of different name changes. Basically, let's say Jiao Di was like the first wrestling style. That was noted back in the old annals of pretty much the first history book of China, right? But later it became something called Jiao Li, which became more of a standardized, we'll call it standardized fighting system. Later it was in the Imperial Army and also taught to military in general, all the way through into like the 19th century. Uh-huh. There were competitions for Shuai Jiao. If you wanted to be an imperial bodyguard, you had to do Shuai Jiao.
Wow.
So it was a big thing, and pretty much I would argue it's partially a nomadic style. There are a lot of different groups all across China, and if you follow all the way down on the Silk Road, you see there's many different wrestling arts. But particularly Shuai Jiao has been Beijing and all in the northern, mostly northern upper northern China.
It seems like it's the more practical martial art in China. Why is it that it's not as popular as other martial arts? I mean, people are. It seems like they're more into practicing the more flowery arts than this.
Well, I think just like you have an issue with student retention for judo, even for Brazilian jiu-jitsu and other grappling styles. I'd say it's kind of similar in that respect. Most of the Shuai Jiao teachers came here, figure late 70s. Our grandmaster, he came here in 1971, and other teachers followed from that point. But basically, it's not a large group, and that has something to do with it, I'd imagine, more than anything. But also, like I said, student retention. I mean, there are plenty of schools around the country that do have decent school sizes, but nothing in the same range of judo, jiu-jitsu, or otherwise. Mainly because it just hasn't been popularized the way other arts have.
Right.
I know that the sports ministry of China is actually trying to push very hard to promote as much on their end as possible. So we're seeing a lot more international tournaments now, a lot more events that are happening to try to really bring it up there. I know that a lot of people would like to see Shuai Jiao in the Olympics. Because it's dynamic, I can understand it. I just don't know if we get past the Judo Commission to do it. And I would respect it. They're two arts that from a visual don't look all that different.
Yeah, I really Bruce Lee fought the establishment back in the 60s, and he complained about the martial arts being really being a classical mess. That it couldn't function in a real street fight or anything like that. It's strange to me that Bruce Lee never mentioned Shuai Jiao. You know what I mean? And it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Why is it that wouldn't he have practiced it and used it himself? You know what I mean?
Most likely not, because the thing is, you figure really if you look at in general with Chinese martial arts. After 1950s, a lot of different people went to Taiwan. A lot of the Shuai Jiao people went to Taiwan, and a lot of other people kind of just milled around until later on. Like now you have a lot of Shuai Jiao schools in China where you didn't really have that 20, 30 years ago. Bruce Lee came from the South, and the South there is Shuai Jiao. It's just much harder to find. Mm-hmm. And so if he came here, most likely, I'm not going to say he might not have had the exposure, but there was almost no Shuai Jiao when he was here.
Wow.
What year did Bruce Lee die? It was
I think 72 or 73, something like that.
Right. So our grandmaster literally came here in 71, and our great grandmaster, he came along with our great grandmaster on a bunch of tours, but he came himself in 1971. So there really wasn't that much exposure here in general. It wasn't until like the mid to late 70s you'd see a lot more of it, more schools showing up around the country.
I'm not trying to get you in trouble or sound controversial, but I would imagine that if you were a Shuai jiao practitioner, you would have to have been considered the best fighter in China. I mean, you wouldn't have had as much exposure as the other guys, but that's a guy you wouldn't want to mess with, if you were in China practicing Shuai jiao.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, if you consider the fact that Shuai jiao in general, right, there are two different aspects of it. There's a more military aspect, and then there's more sport aspects, right? Right. So the sporting aspect is more. You'll see it more. There's a park in China called Gelfand Park, and I know that the teacher there has been running that class for quite some time. And basically, what they do is it's just literally a bunch of people come in the park and they wrestle. Right, it's not very formal, but they get people, and the games in China have always been like that, where people would come down and people would watch these big events of Shuai jiao, but it really hasn't been the case in a long time. So if you're looking at an understanding to kind of see where there's been a break, because that's really because there are military people that practice Shuai jiao, there's regular people that practice Shuai jiao, and not everything is completely the same. Right, there's more. Let's say you can learn. The way we teach Shuai jiao, the way we understand it as a military art, but we teach it both in competition and in real life practice. Right. So, not everyone has had that experience. Some people have more of a wrestling base or otherwise, and it really depends on who they learn from, where they learn from, and what area in China, for that matter, that the other end learned from. Because you've got a bunch of different Shuai jiao styles, so to speak, which at this point I'd say are starting to blend some, but everyone's still maintaining their pieces. So different Shuai jiao teachers and different styles and different ways. If that makes any sense.
But it's an established art form at this point because it's been out there for thousands of years.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely established. But let's just argue that there's always an argument or discussion about what techniques are considered the base or the core of the style. Right? As we learned it, as my school learned it, we learned it with 84 groups of throws. Now, there are other kinds of throws and there are other concepts. So there are other teachers out there who might consider the standard different, and which is fine. But how we teach is, like I said, the 84 groups of throws, and we work off of that from the teaching from our grandmaster.
Wow.
So and for us, it's pretty much those 84 throws. I mean, those are, we'll argue, some are similar in basic concept, but the hand placements are different. The movements are slightly different. There's not, I can't tell you there's more than one type of hip throw, right? I can tell you there's maybe 15 or maybe let's say 10 different variations of a hip throw. Right. But I can tell you there's still just one hip throw, so that'd be one group.
I can imagine. Right? I can imagine combining this art with Sanda.
Sure. Well, Sanda, if you consider where it came from, that's actually the games, the Jiao Li games back in the 200 BC. These games were actually, that's where Sanda came from. You'd fight basically punch, kick, lock, and throw until you either died or you became a bodyguard. The fact is, look, Sanda is very useful. The Shuai jiao technique can be very useful in Sanda, and it's really more about the methodology, because anyone can teach a throw.
Right.
It's not just throwing. It's concept behind. It's an understanding of cutting distance. I'm very fortunate to have some very good teachers, and we, not just in Shuai jiao but other arts. And when you look at the basics of fighting, they're all about the same. It's just about your methodology of what you're really gunning for.
Right.
Some people want to box, and I love boxing. I'm very fortunate to have a great boxing coach. One of my guys, Harry Fontana, who I said he was in our class, and he's shown me, just got me a much clearer idea of my boxing. But even at that, I know I don't want to box. I'm 5'6". My arm length is short. I weigh I'm about 200 pounds and maybe 210 right now, and I'm 5'6", and I'm not obese, but I'll be damned, my waist is pretty much at my knees. So so I don't want to sit there and try to box with somebody all day long. But on the flip end, I want to know how to, and I want to know how to open up and get into my opponent, and that's really, more than anything, that's the ideological difference between Shuai jiao and many other arts, because we really don't want to play. For us, it's about, it's like a battle of chess, right? I'm going to go to try to do this technique. I'm going to open you up. I'm going to come and do a technique. And hey, you change, so I have to change with it. Kind of like in capoeira, the question and answer, right? Same basic concept. I go to do something, you answer, right? Well, it's no different. It's just I want to keep pressing, right? If it's a lost cause, I get out.
Right.
But if I can, I want to take you down because I don't have the time to deal with you. Maybe you have a friend next to you, maybe you got a friend behind. That's always the mentality that we gun for. Take him down quick. Now, it doesn't always work. And, in Sanda, for instance, you're stuck. That person knows you're fighting, you're fighting, and you're going at it, and that's just what it is. But it doesn't mean you still can't do any technique. It just means you have to be more mindful about what you're doing and not to give too much away.
Yeah.
Most wrestlers kind of just bum rush and they go in. We try to kind of take that out of the equation.
Well, what I've seen, so far is amazing. And I think that, if anyone's going to practice anything Chinese or classical, they should practice Shuai jiao. I think that is very effective. I've seen a lot of the moves, and I've seen you, I've seen some of the documentaries you were in and stuff like that, and that's an art that I want to learn. You know what I mean?
No doubt, man. I really appreciate that. I mean, look, we love to teach, and we want to get it out there. It's like anything else. It's just, it's like media, constantly pushing.
I think it was Joe Louis, the martial artist, who he once said that wrestlers are the best fighters in the world. I don't know if you agree with that, and I don't know if, whoever listens to this is going to agree with that, but you definitely need wrestling in a fight. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, but you do.
Well, you know what it is. I think that when it comes down to it, wrestling gives you an understanding that most other arts can't of the body. One way or another, whether it's Greco-Roman, whether it's judo, whether it's sambo, whether it's Shuai jiao, just moving the body is half the lesson. How it moves and how you move with the body as you move it, everything like that, and all that really matters. And so, I can definitely agree. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, so I think I kind of like it. But wrestling is integral.
That's
awesome. It really teaches you, and you get a lot of, when you get that body to body, you get that more so than in other martial arts, and that would be, the argument between, Shuai jiao and other Chinese martial arts. A lot of other kung fu arts don't practice the fighting as much, and they don't get as much contact as we do. We get contact every day, and the more contact you get, the more you understand it, I think.